Well, we got that terrible news, didn't we, yesterday, about the deaths of 12 migrants in a boat in the Channel, including a pregnant woman and 3 children. It's potentially now the deadliest year for illegal migrant crossings, with 25 people dying so far this year alone. That's up from the 2023 toll of 12. The French Interior Minister has added to it all by saying that the Prime Minister should sign what he calls a migrant treaty with the European Union in a further push to what he says will end the scourge of the illegal smuggling across Europe. So what needs to be done to solve this crisis, and is it in the gift of Keir Starmer? Well, tonight I'm asking you this question. Is the French Interior Minister right? Are we a soft touch? Is that why so many migrants head here and don't stay in France? Tell me what you think. Email farage@gbnews.com. Well, joining me now is Kevin Saunders. He's a former Chief Immigration Officer who led the Border Force immigration team in Calais. Kevin, evening. I suspect this French Interior Minister has got a point. We are a bit of a soft touch, aren't we?
Good evening, Andrew. Yes, we are. He's totally right. And until we toughen up, this is going to continue. And the French have been very right in what they're saying. For example, if you come to the UK, you can work in the unregulated economy very easily because you don't have an ID card, nobody bothers to check who you are. Unlike Europe, where to go to work in Europe, you have to produce an ID card, even if you're digging spuds in a field. So the French, unfortunately, are dead right. We make it too nice for the people when they arrive.
And what about the French? I saw the French police today, just one day after 12 people perished in the Channel. There were lots of migrants rushing into the water to get in a dinghy, and we saw some French police officers, I would say at best, sauntering in so-called pursuit after them. They didn't give a hoot.
Well, I think what we need to look at is how the French reported yesterday's disaster. And in fact, some French channels didn't report it at all. It was only headlines, really, on regional television in northern France and a little bit on France 3. Other than that, it wasn't reported at all. The French have got their own problems. They've got a wobbly French government. They've got riots over there. They've got all sorts of problems. They're not interested in what's happening in the UK. And in fact, the French public just want shot of the migrants. They see them as a nuisance, a big nuisance in Calais. And if they're going to go to the UK, all well and good.
You've been there, you've done the job. Why are we losing control here? What's the problem, in your view? And what does the Prime Minister, this new team that say they're going to smash the gangs, what do they need to do and how quickly can they do it?
Well, they're not going to smash the gangs. Let's be realistic. We haven't a hope in hell of smashing the gangs. As we go after one gang, if we're fortunate in wrapping up one gang, another 2 spring up. And we've seen that this year in France already. The French have taken out 30-odd gangs, but it hasn't stopped it one little bit. So no, we're not going to win this war by smashing the gangs, because we can't smash the gangs.
How do we win the war then?
Sorry?
How do we do it then? How do we stop this?
Well, what you've got to do is you've got to convince the French that they've got to get rid of this stupid idea that they won't intercept people in the Channel. As you so rightly said, the French made an effort on the beaches yesterday and today, but they won't do anything once the people are actually in the water. So even if that boat is only in 6 inches of water, they won't stop it. Their view is that once they're in the water, that's it. It's not their problem anymore.
All right. OK. Kevin, thanks for joining me. That's Kevin Saunders, who was the Chief Immigration Officer who led the Border Force team in Calais. The panel tonight, delighted to say, Sir Conor Burns, former Conservative MP, was a Conservative MP till Rishi Sunak's deranged decision to call an early election. And Joe Phillips, who worked for Paddy Ashdown and worked with me many years ago.
Many years ago,
on a radio programme, and a very experienced broadcaster. Let me ask you first, Connor, the first thing Keir Starmer's government did, and they made a big thing about it, was scrap the Rwanda plan. Look, we never did get a plane in the air, but as we probably invested 400, was it 500, maybe even 600 million pounds of public money on the Rwanda plan, should he not have at least perhaps tried to see if we could get a plane in the air, if it would act as a deterrent?
Yes, is the short answer to that. And I think you've got to look at why, Rwanda was not a perfect scheme by any means at all. From what you just heard, there are no easy solutions to this, but Rwanda was an attempt to send a signal that if you come here illegally, you may not get to stay here. And one of the great magnets of this illegal migration is this reality that we send almost no one back. In my own former constituency, we had 4 hotels in the town, in the centre, that were previously used for hospitality accommodation, tourist accommodation, given over to people claiming asylum in this country. And one of the challenges we had, apart from a few bonehead Tory MPs who kept trying to appeal to the London Liberal dinner party circuit about how pro all this they were. Well, I can think of a few. There were a few not that far away from my own area in Bournemouth. But the problem was that because the opinion polls were so consistent that we were going to be thrown out, the civil service had gone on a go slow on this. So even if we got all the legislation through, the chances of getting the flights into the air were zero. I think the then Prime Minister was very frustrated. But what Starmer has done, we saw before the election, do you remember, Andrew, they were interviewing some of these migrants in France who said, well, we're waiting. We're waiting for Michel Starmer, and then we'll come across. Of course we should have kept it. It wasn't perfect, but at least it was something.
You're part of that Liberal dinner party set,
hardly, and I certainly am not in London, as you know, so let's get that out of the way to start with. Rwanda was as daft and as expensive as any other idea and gimmick. I mean, part of the problem is, and I think the point that the French Interior Minister made today is that there needs to be some sort of agreement, which isn't just about Britain sending yet more millions of pounds to French police.
Nearly 500 million so far.
It needs to be an agreement about returns and about interception, because since we left Europe, we have no right of return because we left the Dublin Agreement.
We didn't leave Europe, of course. We left the EU.
Well, left the EU, but we're no longer part of the EU, so we're not part of the Dublin Agreement. We don't have any safe legal borders, legal ways for people to cross. And, the idea that it's a soft touch, I mean, Kevin is right in the sense that if you get across and you can disappear into the underground economy, then you probably can go and work for a pittance and live in a garage or, live in a caravan or something like that and take your chances that way. But part of the problem is the huge backlog of processing asylum claims, as you know, Connor. I mean, there were millions and millions, and part of that obviously was to do with COVID, but of course COVID stopped people travelling as well. But people have been sitting, waiting for months when actually they could either be deported if they are not legally entitled to stay, or they could be working. I mean, you can't even work legally in this country until you've been here for a year, and you can't do that unless your claim's been processed.
Are we a soft touch?
Well, you have to ask yourself the question, a couple of questions actually on this. The Tory leadership we may touch on later, they're all obsessing about the ECHR.
Yes, they are.
What a lot of nonsense. There are many other countries that are fully subscribing members of the ECHR who send a very high proportion of people who arrive illegally in their jurisdictions
But because
back.
they're processing them more quickly.
But they send them back. We don't, right? We don't. And that's why a lot of people want to come here. We immediately put them into hotels. How many hotels in France are they in before they come here? Not very many. The conditions in Calais are pretty abysmal. And then once you get here, then eventually you start to bring all family and all sorts of other things. And the illegal working, there's all sorts of stuff that has been written about people acting as Deliveroo drivers and taking ponying somebody else's identity. And the police, I have to say, are pretty woeful on some of this stuff. We saw in Bournemouth a very standoffish attitude by the police. Some of that is terrified of being accused of racism because of the colour of some of the people's skins who are coming in. But yeah, I think we are a soft touch, and that's why so many more people want to come here than want to. France is a safe country.
It is.
So you're looking at me aghast at this terrible thing that I'm saying. France is a perfectly safe country. So why aren't they claiming asylum in France?
Who knows?
Well, no, but we know this is a very pertinent question.
That is the point, isn't it?
It's a really pertinent question.
It is a point that I don't know the answer to.
Because they know they've put them in a nice warm hotel here rather than a campsite in France.
I don't think they're nice warm hotels. I mean, I think the idea that they come here and they're put up in 4-star hotels.
You are getting into a boat, risking your life to cross a dangerous stretch of water.
Which tells you how desperate they are,
Well, hang on. Whoa, let's reverse up here. They are fleeing persecution, many of them. By the way, you don't notice many women and children getting off these boats, do you?
There were a lot of women on that boat that capsized yesterday.
They are fleeing persecution,
one of whom was pregnant,
apparently,
and there were 10 children.
And they're in France, a safe country, a member of the beloved EU. Why do they then want to get on a boat
you would have to ask
and come across the dangerous stretch of channel of water to claim asylum in the UK?
Yeah.
I think the French minister is onto something.
There are
and
questions
and why are so many of these desperate people, Joe, coming from Turkey? What persecution are they fleeing from Turkey?
I don't know, and I don't. Where have those figures?
These are official figures. Turkey is an increasingly high number.
Iran is the highest number.
Vietnam and Turkey are both on 10%. Arrivals from Vietnam, Turkey. That's where we go on our holidays.
But Turkey, presumably, we have got a return agreement, as we do with Albania, or as we did with Albania.
We now do. We signed one, the government with Albania.
But, I mean, you've got somebody coming from Iran, let's say. You've got somebody fleeing Gaza. You've got somebody fleeing Sudan. You know, there are many, many reasons why people are absolutely, utterly desperate.
There are very few people fleeing from Gaza because you can neither get in or get out of Gaza.
Do you not accept a lot of these are economic migrants? Look at the age of these. They're young men.
Some are, but they weren't on that boat yesterday.
No, that's true.
There were women there, and actually, when you look at the figures from the Home Office, the numbers of asylum claims are pretty evenly split
just
between
very briefly,
women
back to where we started this, Rwanda.
men.
If Starmer had allowed a plane to go to Rwanda, if it had got taken off, I do not think that might have been a deterrent.
No.
You don't think it would have deterred a single boat
No, I
from
don't.
crossing?
And I think the only thing that deters people, and I've had this conversation with Nigel Farage, is just one thing we agree on because we're both sailors. The only thing that stops people crossing the channel is the weather. What's happening now, and this bit makes it much more problematic, is that they're moving further along the coast, away from Calais and away from, this one yesterday was Boulogne, but they're also starting up in the canals, you know, near Etaples and places like that. So they're going under cover of darkness down these canals. The smugglers are taking the thwarts out of the boat, which is why they sink. So there's absolutely, you know, and one of the things that Keir Starmer was discussing when he went to Germany with Olaf Scholz was about the fact that Germany is where most of the boats are stored and come from. So, you know, everybody has got a role to play in this.
All of this to leave a safe country.
A very good
All
point.
of this to leave a perfectly safe country.
I'm going to thank my panel. They're staying with me.